What's up, Wildcats? Welcome to the fifth episode of the TNH Roundup. My name is Josh Morrill. I'm the executive editor. It is August 16th at 7:52 p.m. I am joined by...
I'm Anna Kate Muncie, and I'm the managing editor.
I'm Hannah Donahue, and I'm the content editor.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. This is our fifth episode, so a huge milestone for us. We're going to keep trucking on. Our first print edition of the newspaper is coming out this the 27th, August 27th. So please be ready for that. So we're just going to jump right into it today. Our first order of business is getting to President James Dean's address to UNH students this past week. He acknowledged that it's been a stressful time for all of us in the UNH community. We had to go home in the spring in March. So faculty, staff, and the students had our lives kind of just abruptly changed. And, he addressed that he felt for us, and that, the UNH, everyone in the UNH community has been working to get us back to this moment, back on campus for the last, 4 or 5 months. So he mentioned the new testing facility. He said it's one of the best in the country, which is a pretty bold statement. What were you guys' thoughts on his address?
I really liked it. So we received it by email, and then I kind of saw it on Twitter as well, and sort of watched through the whole thing. And I liked the sort of visual aids. Towards the middle of the video, it had like people wearing masks and like settling into class and walking through campus, and I think going to the dining hall. And I thought that was nice, just because so much of what we've been hearing about is so theoretical and so we've never seen it in action. Like, we weren't all wearing masks and that sort of thing when we were sent home in March. And so I thought that was helpful, just to kind of picture how life could be with the masks and the social distancing. So I appreciated that part of it a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that statement. I think that being able to visualize, first of all, I love how quick they acted to put what they're talking about in action in video form. Granted, I'm sure, obviously a lot of it was probably staged, so it's going to be a little bit different than what it'll be like when we're on campus. But seeing that and normalizing it just before we even get there is extremely important. When it comes to, the wearing masks, the social distancing. They've been posting pictures online as well of what classrooms are looking like, and what common areas are looking like. They have signs saying sit here or don't sit here, just to make sure that social distancing is enforced. So I like that I don't want to say starting to be to visualize it, but it kind of is the first true glimpse that we've seen at the actual campus being transitioned into COVID mode.
Yeah. And that visual aid, that B-roll of the students with the masks and in the classroom 6 feet apart, like you guys are saying, that is so huge, because, students, they're going to do, what they see other people do. That's just human nature. So if they, if UNH gets ahead of the curve and they kind of, put students in the mindset that this is what you're supposed to do, I think it's going to help as much as it can. But with college students, you never know. I've seen photos from other universities that have had students go back already. There's been big crowds with no masks. There's, hundreds of kids just piled on a lawn. And hopefully, this doesn't happen at UNH. So, hopefully stuff like this, little anecdotal videos and stuff like they have been posting, hopefully that helps. And one thing he mentioned in the video was basically that he hopes, and the administration hopes, that we get to Thanksgiving, the next 12 weeks or so, I think it is. And I really,
this is all we have to get through.
Yeah. And I think that really puts it in perspective. It's just all you got to do is wear a mask for this 12 weeks, and then you can go home and, still wear a mask. But he's basically saying it's not that hard, and just kind of, help them out a little bit so we can all stay on campus.
So I think one thing that I've just kind of been thinking about it, and this might be the complete wrong term for it. I just don't really know how else to describe it. other than COVID culture shock. I think a lot of students are going to get to campus and they might be coming from somewhere that doesn't require masks, or, you know, is either very low in COVID cases or very high in COVID cases. It's going to be different for everybody. And so being able to, again, normalize it through all those visualizations is going to be really helpful, but it still isn't like we aren't experiencing the reality of that until we all set foot on campus. So I'm hoping that with this kind of transparency that it'll be a little bit easier for students to get used to it. But I hope that the university recognizes that it's going to be very difficult for some students at first to really like get used to the new normal.
I think that's a really interesting point, Hannah, that you bring up about how a lot of people are probably coming from very different kind of summers, you know, from one end of the kind of spectrum where you've been exclusively inside and like only going to the grocery store, and then the other end where wherever you're from has been fully reopened. And so I think it will be really interesting to see how that kind of plays into even just like friend groups and that sort of dynamic and like people you interact with. I think that'll be definitely kind of a learning curve. Hopefully hopefully students will adapt quickly to the changes, but I think that will be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I really feel like UNH is just banking on this going as well as possible. You know, hopefully there's not too many cases. Then once we get to the spring semester, they're really hoping that a vaccine comes out so they don't really have to worry as much. They don't have to have all these restrictions. So basically these 12 weeks are just like a trial period. And, you know, hopefully it lasts 12 weeks because a lot of administration, you know, faculty don't really probably like have voiced that they don't really think it's going to happen. So, you know, hopefully students can do their best and last these 12 weeks, because if there is a vaccine, I don't think there's any two ways about it that campus will be open. So there's going to be a lot less stress among students, I believe. So I think they're really banking on that, and you know, hopefully it does happen, because then, you know, like the economy around UNH will be a lot better, because you know, if in these 12 weeks a ton of cases, you know, happen, you know, businesses have had to go through jumps and hoops to get back going, and if there's a ton of cases in Durham now from all the students, like they're gonna have to shut down again. So I really think there's like a trickle down effect with all of that. So, you know, hopefully it goes well, and hopefully they'll find a vaccine for spring.
So there have been several reports on campus of delayed testing time. So if you don't remember, UNH did provide that they committed to having 3 to 5 day test results, I believe with Community MD and Quest Diagnostics. I'm pretty sure it's with Community MD, not so sure about Quest Diagnostics, but there have been some reported delays of it taking up to 10 days to get back the results. So it's a little bit concerning, just because we are getting into that. Starting next week, we'll be getting into that 8 days prior to the first day of classes, where there are going to be tons of students going to UNH, getting their tests, going to their Community MD or Quest Diagnostics lab site, trying to get tests. And it's just gonna, I don't know, I'm worried about like the testing facilities or the labs getting overwhelmed with all of these, because, you know, it's just the people who are going to be on campus in the next week or so, and we're already seeing delays amongst faculty, staff, students. Well, for some students, it's coming out as they're getting them within as soon as 2 days later. Others, you know, like I said, as soon as 10 days later. So that is kind of a big concern for a lot of people, that they're not going to have their test results in time for the first day of classes. And if that's the case, what are students supposed to do if they don't have their test results back and they went within that 3 to 5 day window prior to the first day of classes?
I think too, it's only logical if you're kind of hearing from your friends or your friends' friends these anecdotal stories about how their test results right now are taking so long to get back to them. it's only kind of logical to worry about once there's such a huge number of tests being processed every day, how the times will improve by then, and how that maybe it's just working out the kinks in the process, but I think it's only natural to be concerned about it.
Yeah, I actually think it's a good thing because if they're getting all these kinks out of the way, like they're kind of working stuff out, I think it's going to be better. You know, if this happens in the middle of the semester, I think it'd be a lot worse. But you know, if some people don't get their test results back in 10 days or whatever, and then they kind of regroup and they're like, oh, we need to do this, this, and this to make sure these test results get back. I think this could end up being a silver lining type deal. So, you know, hopefully that's the case. I'm not fully convinced that is the case, but that's my hope. And, you know, there,
Yeah, it'll also be different once the UNH Health and Wellness Lab is up and running with COVID test results as well. Isn't that part of the plan?
yeah.
Yeah,
I
because
think it's supposed to be up next week.
yeah, so they're sending them out to external testing sites all over the country. So that could have to do with the delays in result times, where one person might be getting their result or their test sample sent to Massachusetts, and another person sent to I don't know, just a further state away. Like it really all depends on where your sample ends up.
Yeah. And I think it's not going to be good, you know, since you need the test for the start of the year for everyone to be back. So, you know, that's obviously not a good thing, but hopefully they can, work out some of these issues that they have, or supposed issues. So the next thing we want to get to is a story that came out in the Union Leader this past week that said that there's been positive cases with different schools throughout New Hampshire, with home tests before they go to school. So there's been multiple cases, and a negative test is required to go to all schools. So if you do test positive at home before you come to school, you have to quarantine for 10 days. And there's been, multiple reported cases. So New Hampshire Health and Human Services Commissioner Lori Chibret, I think that's how you pronounce it. She basically said that, this isn't ideal, but it's glad that they caught these cases before they went to school. So I think that's how they're looking at it. They're kind of looking at it optimistically, but it's not great. New Hampshire doesn't have a ton of cases, I believe. The administration said that there's 8 cases in Durham right now, 316 in New Hampshire. So there's not a ton of cases, but it's good. It's good at least that they're catching these, but hopefully there aren't too many more.
Another kind of big topic in that article has to do with the policy shift from the Health and Human Services Department in New Hampshire. So people might remember, but back in the spring, there were some issues because people on UNH campus or UNH students would be tested for coronavirus, but their test result would be attributed to their hometown, even though they were in Durham. And so I can read exactly the wording, but it says, in a major change, state public health authorities have decided to require students to list their college residence as their home address for the purpose of recording COVID cases. And so obviously the thinking with that is that we want to be able to get a better picture of kind of the spread of COVID in college towns, and we wouldn't be able to get that if the positive test was being attributed to, say, some town in Mass or some town in New York.
So something to kind of put that into perspective. So when you are registering for your COVID test, whether I think it's the one through Convenient MD. So Convenient MD is currently running the testing site by Wildcat Stadium. When you go to register, it's asking for your home address at the time of your testing. So currently, I would say this is where I'm living, and I'm not on campus. So, but then say I'm going to go get tested when I am on campus. This is where I'm living now. You want to be sure that you are reporting that accurately so that it does not get sent, it's not attributed to the wrong place.
Yeah, I believe that the New Hampshire Health and Human Services Department said that all the stats and positive cases from college towns aren't going to be released. I think that they might change that if numbers get too high, because different communities have to be informed about those numbers if they get really high, obviously. So, um, I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's probably part of like confidentiality and stuff like that. I know obviously, names aren't going to be released, but I don't see why numbers shouldn't be released, because that's been part of the reason why all the outbreak has happened in the whole country. It's because people aren't as informed as they should be that this was really serious. So that'll probably change. So we'll see in the near future. And as we said, that this will probably hopefully not affect the economy too much. Hopefully, um, there aren't too many cases, and businesses and restaurants can stay open, and Durham can thrive through this. Until Thanksgiving, when all the students leave for break.
The next topic we wanted to discuss was the student-led virtual town hall that took place last Tuesday. So it was co-hosted with some representatives from the Student Senate, including Student Body President Nicholas Fitzgerald, as well as Provost Wayne Jones and several other administrators. And so there was a lot covered. It was based around questions students had submitted, both during the town hall and prior to it. There was definitely an emphasis this town hall, I would say, on the mask wearing. I feel like the last one I watched was a lot about logistics and the testing, because that had just been released, the testing program. This one was definitely more geared towards wear your mask, this is what you should be doing, this is how residence halls are going to work, dining, things like that. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about anything that stuck out to you from that, any new information?
It kind of just reinforced, like you said, wearing masks. You have to get a test within 8 days of coming to campus. They also mentioned that if you're off campus, you're going to have self-testing kits that they're going to provide you. So there's probably going to be more info coming out about that, because they haven't really shored up how that process is going to work. They also said that there's 8 cases in Durham, which isn't that bad, but I don't know. Did they say if any of them were students? I don't know if they did.
I don't think they can disclose that as of now.
So they can't say that as of now, obviously, or as she said. And they mentioned that there's new tags for the modes of operation for classes. So if you go on and look at your classes, you'll be able to tell what they are, or at least the latest installment. So it's the hybrid classes, which are half in person, half online, and then there's the rotational, where you might be on campus or in person for one of your classes a week, or just all in person or all online. And they also mentioned like cleaning in dorms. They said bathrooms will be more regulated. They'll be cleaned more often, and then people have to wear masks in like common areas, lounges, in the hallways, which I thought was it's probably smart, but it's borderline like too much. Like, you're in your place of residence. If they said you had to wear it in your room, that would be ludicrous, but they didn't. So I don't know what your guys' take are on that, but I thought that was getting a little much.
Something that I kind of found interesting was they did discuss, I believe Ruth Abelman, she is the director of residential life. She said that there are going to be set capacities that are going to be enforced by RAs for things like the bathrooms and the common areas. So that kind of adds to their duties as an RA and what they are going to have to do, for social distancing just within their floor, which I think that'll be something to keep an eye out for, because like it could be like the morning and like you don't know how many people are going to have class at a certain time in the morning and have to go in and jump in the shower or things like that. So that'll really be something.
Yeah. And RA is helping out with the organizing of like when people are going to get tested is like, it's a lot on top of, doing college. So it'd be interesting to see what, if RAs are getting extra compensation this year, if they're getting extra, you know, anything extra incentive to be an RA, because there's
having less things taken, or if they're having things taken off of their plate, like for some certain requirements. Isn't there some requirement where you have to have like a social a week or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm sure I want to see like what their job description is now, because I'm sure it's drastically altered from years past. And they're probably going to have different trainings, and it's going to be a lot different. So something else they mentioned was that the Diamond Library will be open with social distancing rules. Computers will be farther apart, and the Zeke's Cafe, I think that's the one in the library, will not be open. So the library will be open if you want to go there and study. So yeah.
About the other buildings that have cafes in them. You've got Kingsbury with Albert's, you've got the place in Paul, all the places around campus that have those cafes in them. Are they going to be open? Are they going to be closed? Because those are heavily trafficked areas and buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think I was pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Hamel Rec will also be operating kind of like the library with reduced capacity and more spacing, and you might have to wear masks, but I'm pretty sure they said it would be open.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe they mentioned that in the last town hall, and they didn't really elaborate on it. They might have in the FAQs, but I believe you're correct. And then you will most likely have to wear a mask in there. I think that they mentioned that at one point. And also, they kind of short up the strike rules for the masks. And the first strike is a meeting with your college dean. The second one is probation with a second meeting with your dean. And then third is basically you're kicked off campus. You're evicted from your housing if you live on campus, and you can't do in-person classes. So they shored up that part, and they also said that Babcock and Adams Tower are the quarantining dorms.
Another interesting thing that I've kind of been wondering about kind of those quarantine or COVID dorms, Provost Jones kind of, I forget his exact wording, so I apologize, Provost Jones, if you're listening to this, but he said, someone asked about what happened if Babcock and Adams Tower were full, and I think he sort of implied that if it got to the point where those were both full, we would probably have moved to remote learning anyways, and people wouldn't really be on campus anymore. So that's kind of a benchmark to think about as we go through this semester. Depending on how quickly these dorms are filling up, will probably relate to whether or not we get to stay on campus until Thanksgiving.
Yeah, he did at one point address, again, I don't know the exact wording, but something along the lines of them monitoring the capacities of those dorms. And I think once it passes a certain point, that is when they know, like, okay, it's getting a little bit not out of control, but just we need to reconsider mode of operation. And that's kind of when they talked a little bit more about the modes of operation, going into the red, orange, yellow, green. So we are still currently in the orange mode of operation. And for those of you who are aware of what that means, orange is limited operations. So, COVID cases are still increasing on or off campus. There's still state restrictions being initiated. Regular testing of everyone on campus. Medical resources are available and not at risk. And then as for the campus status, it'll be limited operations with masks and social distancing required. Only critical research allowed on-site and no external events. And that on-campus housing remains open. Dining is restricted to takeout. No student events. Instruction is restricted. All classes go remote but can stay on/off campus. So that's where we currently are. The anticipated for fall of 2020 is yellow, which they said that is their target for August 24th, which is going to be a week from tomorrow at the time of filming. So as for yellow, that means COVID cases are low on and off campus, that there are limited state restrictions and gatherings are okay. Medical resources are available and not at risk. Frequent on-campus testing for all, including those who are asymptomatic. As for campus status, it's full operations on campus with a student focus, masks required in public areas, classrooms, and labs, research enterprise operating at 90% capacity on site, and there are going to be selective external events. And then for student status, campus housing is open with reduced density and quarantine dorms. Dining is normal at reduced density, which is 50% plus takeout. And then there will be limited student events, small groups in residential communities, instruction face-to-face with lower density, and teaching labs / art studios operate with full personal protective equipment. So it's a bit of, I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a long shot for a week away. It is a little bit concerning. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
One thing they haven't addressed that I want them to is like an evacuation plan. It's like if those two dorms get full and then they have to contact trace for all of those students, like it's going to take a while for them to figure out, who was with who was 6 feet within who, it's going to be a while. And if off campus kids start going home because they can't really monitor them, it's going to be kind of a S show. So that's worst case scenario, but if worst case scenario happens, I want them to have a plan. So I'm sure that they're working on one or that they already have one, but that's probably more important, or not more important, but as important as a plan for in-person learning. Like you need to have a doomsday plan. So I'd really like them to address that because, worst case scenario, I want to know what I should do. So
I would love to hear progress updates.
Yeah.
Like I said, us being a week out, where are we at in terms of getting to yellow? What is left that needs to happen in this next week in order for us to go back to on campus? Because as of right now, we can't go back. Like, while there are students moving in their stuff, we're still in orange, which is remote operations. So we're not remote operations, but remote classes and no face-to-face instruction. So I'd really like to get an update on where they're at and what they think is going to need to happen in the next week.
I do hope that, I don't know exactly how this would look, but some sort of, I wouldn't say daily, but weekly or twice weekly kind of communication with students. And like we talked about, I know they're saying they're not going to be able to release the amount of cases on UNH's campus, but my concern with things like that is students saying, well, they're not saying, so maybe it's not that much, or maybe I can go do this. And I worry about if there aren't open lines of communication, how that could kind of contribute to an absolute mess as well.
Yeah. I think they'll probably, or at least I hope they have like a weekly update or newsletter or something that says, oh, we're still in yellow or we're still in orange or something, just so we know what the deal is. And if things are getting worse, things are getting better, like you're saying, like, different updates. So hopefully they'll do something like that.
All right, and that's all for this week. Thanks for watching episode 5 of TNH Roundup. You can find us on social media at The New Hampshire on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. And if you have any questions or comments or anything you'd like us to address, you can send those over to tnhstaff@gmail.com, and we'll see you next week.